What we've done is we looked at the countries which are facing the largest or the most severe ecological threats, then looked at the countries which have got, let's say, the lowest social resilience. So these are the countries least likely to be able to cope. And those countries come to 19 and contain 1.2 billion people within their borders. Now, some of these will be displaced multiple times, and that'll be, let's say, because of floods, cyclones and other natural disasters. But the thing which is truly worrying is the number of people who are going to be facing shortages of water in the next 30 years.
Now, this story appears fairly often in various parts of the world over the last few years. Is it building towards some kind of global or regional crisis?
Well, I think there are a number of areas of the world where these are going to be affected by shortages of water. A lot of the time it comes back to the societal resilience and how wealthy nations are in their ability to be able to cope. So let's say countries like the United States or Australia will suffer from the water shortages. However, the countries that are resilient and will be able to put in the extra facilities to be able to capture water. That's probably true for the Middle East too. They'll be able to create desalination. But if we move to, let's say, sub-Saharan Africa or over to parts of the Middle East, let's say from Syria through to Pakistan, that won't be true. So the countries which are the poorest and with the lowest societal resilience are the ones which are most likely to see societal or ecological collapses.
Do you think the rest of the world takes water security seriously enough? Are enough people, for example, reading your ecological threat register?
Well, certainly a lot of people are reading the ecological threat register. I think a lot of people have been focused on climate change and are thinking climate change is going to be feeling these changes. And it's true, they will. But even without climate change, these ecological threats around particularly water and food are very, very real. For example, 17 countries in the world in the next 30 years are going to more than double their population. All of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. And this will put real stress on these countries. And with a lack of water, then people will be starting to migrate.
And the numbers are huge. You're talking about over 1 billion people, potentially.
Yes, well, there's a number of ways of slicing it. So today, there's something like 2.6 billion people face or live in countries with high to extreme water stress. So high water stress is where more than 40% of the water gets used in any one year. Extreme is when it's more than 80%. But this, by 2040, that's only 20 years away, is going to jump to 5.6 billion people. The large increase in part comes because countries like India and China move into that high water stress scenarios. That's where it's likelihood more than 40% of the available fresh water in the countries will be used.
I was talking to one country's ambassador yesterday who was saying that country needs water from the neighbouring country, but they're unwilling to pay for it because they said it's free in the mountains, but when it comes to us, somebody wants us to pay. Is that a common problem?
Water disputes are likely to increase over time. So if we look at it over the last decade, the number of conflicts over water have increased 270%. The two countries with the most conflicts over water, would you believe, are Yemen and Iraq. So now what we can see is, let's say, things like the Nile, for example. You've got Ethiopia damming it currently, and you've got 90% of the population of Egypt dependent on the Nile. There must be treaties which are formed for the fair sharing of water. And the same thing is true, let's say, through the Mekong Delta. You've got something like 300 million people who indirectly live off the Mekong River. So there needs to be treaties put in place and you get adequate sharing of the water, regardless of how difficult, because if it ends up in conflict, well, in that case, then everyone loses.
What can be done, do you think, to prevent possible conflict or a crisis? Is it down to people like you, to entrepreneurs? Is it down to governments, corporate? I mean, who can prevent the clashes of the future over access to clean drinking water?
Well, I think really there needs to be integrated efforts to try and solve this. Certainly, if we're looking at overseas developmental aid, that'll only go so far. I think you need better family planning packages put in place in countries which have got large increases in population. The key to it, I think, lies in being able to develop micro water industry. So in other words, how can you efficiently capture water on a scale such that you can now use it to create water industries? And the classic example of that would be agriculture. The question comes back, particularly in places like Africa, where you get huge amount of water in the wet season, then extended dry seasons. How do you capture that water, store it, then use it productively for agriculture in such a way that it's economically viable and efficient? If you can do that, then business itself, simply driven by profit, will be able to help solve the problem.
Steve Killelea, many thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.